And we are live. All right, Tyler, thanks so much for coming on the show today. Brandon is not here. So people are just stuck with me. I apologize again. I know a few episodes ago we had only me on here. But anyways, without further ado, why don't we just dive right into it? So Tyler is the author of 3 books. He is the CEO of D1 Recruiting and Tanager Media, and he's also a speaker. So with that, Tyler, we really appreciate you coming on the show. Can you just give our listeners a little bit more about your background and what got you to where you are today?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. So I'm actually busy with a lot of different things that I do on the side, but that's because my day job is as a school teacher. I spent a decade as a professor in education, and now I'm going back to kind of my roots, and I'm teaching elementary school and have for the last couple of years. So I'm pretty busy with that during the day, and then when I come home, I have 4 kids of my own, and so they keep me busy. So most of these things that we'll talk about today are things that I've had to do in my spare time. I'm an early to rise kind of guy, so working hard early in the morning from my 5 to 9, and then I have to hit my 9 to 5. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
I love that. Yeah, very cool. Very cool. So why don't we just rewind the clock and unpack some stuff there? What was what did you do after high school and how did your career progress?
Yeah, so right from high school, I decided that I wanted to be a school teacher.
Okay.
But I also realized that school teachers didn't then and still don't make very much money. And so all along the way, I've been looking for ways to fill in the gaps and have a little income on the side, plus pursuing my passions and my hobbies. And so, when I was in high school, I was a normal kid, played a lot of sports, not really into the academics, but got into a great college and ended up staying in college for a long time and got a bunch of degrees and became a professor, which wasn't in my original plan. But I loved teaching college. And so that was
great.
What
college was it?
I did my undergraduate at BYU, and then I went to University of Hartford in Connecticut for my master's, and then went to Indiana University for my doctorate.
Wow, you're all over the place.
Yeah, so we've moved around the country quite a bit. And,
yeah, it sounds like
it's been a fun ride. Actually, though, we're back in Utah where I started it all, so different part of the state, but it's nice to be closer to family.
Very cool. So what was that point that you realized, you just need to do something else to bring in a little bit of income to supplement your teacher salary? What was that like, and how did you realize that?
Well, so I'd been teaching just a couple years after my undergrad. So when we lived in Connecticut, I was teaching at a school and then doing my master's full-time at night. So I was working full-time and going to school full-time. And we got pregnant with our first child. And I was so stressed because I was just working. I had an hour commute each day in New York traffic. And it was just a really hectic life, but for very little money. And I thought, I can't do this the rest of my life. And as much as I loved teaching, I knew that wasn't a viable path forward if I wanted my wife to be able to stay home to raise the kids and be able to support her in that. And at the time, we were both working full time, and so that wasn't a concern. But I knew that down the road, we might have more kids. And so that was where I thought, okay, I need to get smart about how to make money. And so I really dove in, I was reading Money Magazine and stuff like that, Kiplinger's, and these were the early days of the internet, the early 2000s. And so I would go online to dabble in investing and play the stock market and stuff like that. But I was really just figuring things out as I went. We didn't own any real estate at that point or anything. So I was just really learning about what potential there was for me. But that's where it started, was just knowing that my career path wasn't sustainable from a financial standpoint.
Got it. So what was that first side hustle that you've stumbled upon that you realized is something that you were passionate about, or something that you knew you had the skill set to do? And then describe just how you did it and how you got into it.
Yeah, well, there were really 2. So the first thing that made us any significant money was I did, while I was still in school, started investing. And I'm so grateful that I did that, because we didn't have any money to spare, but we just made it a priority to put money into the stock market, and we mostly just did index funds, nothing too fancy. But the money that I invested, 15, 20 years ago, it's now tripled, quadrupled. And actually, even though we were struggling financially at the time, that has given us a nice reserve now. So when things go wrong or whatever, we have that to pull on. So even though that wasn't really a side hustle, it took a lot of time to learn how to invest and where the best places to go were and things like that. So that was kind of really the first one. But while I was doing that, I did have a skill that I developed as a student, which was to do web design. And so I, just was self-taught. When I was doing my undergrad, I just would look at the code for different websites and try to recreate them. And so I had that in my back pocket. And this was back before you had like WordPress or anything like that could kind of build a website for you. And so I would have friends and family mostly that would come to me and say, hey, I can't pay you much, but I really would like a website for my business. Here's a few $100s. And so again, it wasn't a huge money maker, but
Yeah.
for me, that was a great start just to get into web design and to develop that skill.
That's very cool. Yeah. And you mentioned that you enjoyed doing it. So it wasn't something that was a complete drag. So the money that you were bringing in from it was obviously it was income, but also it wasn't a major drag on you. It was kind of something that you enjoyed, and it's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
No, it was cool because, well, and I've never done a lot of binging on Netflix or anything. Back in the day, it was Hulu, and which I still think exists, but I don't use Hulu anymore. But instead of just watching TV at night, I do the web design. It was cool because I was having a blast, but yeah, it
That's
also
really
made
cool.
money, so it was a bonus on both sides.
Yeah, and you were improving your overall value that you could provide to people when most people were just watching TV and vegging out and
Sure.
not doing anything productive. So
Right.
that's pretty cool. So how did that progress? What did that blossom into as you kept going?
Yeah, well, I've since started a lot of different side hustles, but the cool thing with the web design, so I'll stay on to web design for a minute. It got to the point where I actually wanted to make real money doing web design instead of just having friends and family and doing them favors,
Right.
And so my strategy for that was I actually reached out to all my favorite celebrities. And this was back in the wild west of social media and stuff. Facebook was new on the scene. And so I was able to dig up contact information on some of my favorite people that I was watching on TV and in movies, and just, shoot them a message. And I thought it was brilliant at the time. I was like, if I could get a few celebrity contracts, then I could really grow my business. And, I had these big ideas. And so I drafted this message and reached out to a bunch of people. And then, of course, it crickets, didn't hear back from anyone. And I'm looking at my statistics for my website, my analytics, to see if anyone's even looking at my portfolio or my website.
Yeah.
And I did have a few hits, from New York and from Hollywood. So it was, I at least knew that I got through to people, but then I was like, oh, it was a brilliant idea, but oh well. But the cool thing is a few months passed, and then out of the blue, I got a message from one of my favorite actors. And he was on a show called Psych. And in the show, he wasn't one of there's two main guys, and then there's a bunch of like an ensemble cast. And so his name on the show was Junior Detective Buzz McNabb. And he was like this police comic relief character on the show, and I just loved him. We watched the show as a family, and he was one of my favorite characters. Well, he messaged me back and said, hey, I've always wanted a website, and if you'll build me one, sure, I'm on board. So I built his name's Sage Brocklebank, and he's out of Vancouver. And so we started Skyping back and forth and figuring out what he wanted. And so I built him a site and got it up, and then he was thrilled with it. And so he, of course, referred me to his friends. So I worked with Patrick Subgangi, who's on The Flash. He's the police chief on that.
That is so cool.
And some other cool celebrities, a model and some other people. And then I just met other people. I work now with a professional basketball player, Kyle Collinsworth. And with all these people now, I'm not doing as much design now, but it did help. It did what I wanted it to do. It grew my brand, gave me some credibility. And then the contracts that started coming in were still local businesses, but now I could raise my price point. And so then I got a $5,000 job, and, instead of a couple $100. So it was really cool. And I did that for a few years and loved it. And that's where Tanager Media was born. And I had some people working with me for a while, but in the end, I pursued other passions. And so now I don't take on any new clients, but I have these dear friends in Hollywood and elsewhere where we still work together. I work with Sage. He has a real estate business on the side. And with Kyle, he's the basketball player. He does a lot of speaking and has a health and fitness brand that I help him with. And so, they've grown into these great friends that have influence and have opened doors for me. And I think I've done likewise for them. So it's just been an awesome experience from web design to create these cool relationships.
That's unbelievable. And that's all because you sent those emails. And I can't think of
Yeah.
how many people, myself included, would have been like, you know what, I'm not even going to send this. They're not going to look at it. They're not going to, and you had the stones to just send that. And look what it turned into. That's really cool.
Yeah. Well, and 9 times out of 10, nothing will come from that. And there have been other things where I've tried it out, great big ideas, and they fell flat. And even with the web design, there was one person I really wanted to work with. And I wrote him normal letters by hand, like 4 of them, and then messaged him and everything, and never heard anything back. And I think that's how it goes sometimes in business is
Yep.
You do what you can, you learn from your mistakes, you iterate and try it again. And I was fortunate in this case that it stuck, and then because of word of mouth, that was able to grow. But often it's just landing that first client, that's so hard, and you do whatever you can to make it happen.
That's exactly right. And if you don't ask, it's always going to be a no.
Right.
There was, I believe it was someone actually that we interviewed a while back, and they were talking about how they knew somebody, and that person's son was 14 or 15, and he was going to his first homecoming. And there was this girl, and he kind of liked her, but she was a hot commodity, and everybody was after her. And he was talking to this lady that we interviewed, and she just told him the whole thing about if you don't do anything, then she's not going to go with you, right? And what if you ask and she doesn't go with you? You're in the same exact spot, so you may as well ask and have a chance at her saying yes. And he ended up asking her, and she said yes. So
wow, cool.
Yeah, so that's exactly what happened to you. So that's really cool. So what are some of the other things that you have started and that you're working on?
Yeah. So one of the books I wrote a couple years ago came in response to, we made a big shift as we moved across the country. And when I transitioned from being a professor to an elementary school teacher, part of the move was motivated by my daughter who had health problems. And so we needed to get to a drier climate and make some changes. Well,
wow.
things didn't go as planned. And when we moved, fortunately, we had been able to make a ton of money on the sale of our house. We had improved it, refinished the basement. And so really that was a side hustle that's returned a lot of money to us because we worked hard on this house and sold it for $100,000 more than we paid for it in just a couple years. So that was huge to make, $100,000 in a couple years just by working on our house. But what happened is when we moved, I couldn't get a job right away. And so I stayed home with the kids. We have 4 children now. And my wife went back to work, and it was just a real stressful time for me personally because I was used to making the money and doing the things I loved. But then money was tight again because I was home. And so one of the things I tried on the side just to make ends meet was my brother had told me that you could review products. They'll send you stuff in the mail and Amazon will deliver it to you, and you take a picture or make a video and put it online, and then you get to keep the stuff. And he had done it with really cool stuff like hoverboards and stuff like that, and had made a lot of money. They gave him affiliate links, and he'd made a few $1,000s, making these really awesome videos of hoverboards. But I didn't have the video editing chops and was just starting, no social media and stuff. But I figured out how to make it work. And that first year I did product reviews, I reviewed over 300 things. And it was awesome because they'd send me like remote controlled cars or backpacks and skateboards and cool stuff like that I ended up using when I started as an elementary school teacher. I would have those as rewards for my students. So they got really cool stuff if they worked hard in my class.
Oh, that's so cool.
But that turned into a really cool side hustle because not only did I get to keep the stuff, but as I got better at video, people started paying me more and more money to make reviews. And so in my first year doing product reviews, I made $1,000 and got to keep, over 300 things. The total value of that was in the thousands. But it was just something I did a few hours on the weekend every week. So when I did start back to work as a school teacher, I just do a couple hours on the weekend. But it was like Christmas every day because there'd always be these packages on the porch, and we'd open them up, and I knew what was in them, but my kids didn't. So they'd all get excited. What did you get this week, Dad?
That's neat.
So that's been a real fun side hustle. And then I wrote a book about my experience. So that's one of the books I wrote was how to get free stuff. And it was just, I couldn't believe how easy it was to get started, to build a social media following. I got a ton of Twitter followers right within a few weeks. And it was way easier than I thought it would be. And so rather than every time someone asked me, how did you do it? How did you do it? How did you get all this stuff? I wrote a book. And so that was kind of a cool side hustle. And then the book, of course, has made a little bit of money too. Not a ton. I make more money off the reviews, but it was fun to go ahead and write that and publish it. So
that's really neat. That's very valuable too. I'm sure people listening out there, can you still do that today?
Yeah. Last week I reviewed 2 ukuleles. So my students will be excited. They'll have that in time for Christmas that they can bid on it and hopefully win that in a class auction.
I love that. I love it. So very, very cool. Very cool. What was next? What going forward?
I've done a bunch of little things. One of the things that you mentioned at the beginning is that I'm the founder of D1 Recruiting. Yep. And what happened with that is 5, 6, maybe 7 years ago, as a professor, I was teaching this class in educational technology. And I was telling all my students that they should be blogging, because blogging is a good way to learn about something and to create content at the same time, because as you create content, you learn it better. And so I was really promoting, start blogging about these different academic things. And one of my students kind of called me out on it. He's like, well, Mr. C, what are you blogging about right now? And I wasn't blogging about anything. I had blogged in the past. I had a financial literacy blog and a bunch of educational blogs, but I wasn't blogging about anything. And so my class challenged me. They're like, well, what are you really passionate about? And at the time, the first thing that came to mind was I love college football. And so I took my alma mater, BYU, and I started a little blog about BYU. And that first year, kind of just to prove to my students that if you take action, something will come, I was real consistent. I posted articles every week, several times. And by the end of the year, I'd posted, 200 or 300 articles, but didn't have a huge following yet. It was just growing over time. But with that consistency, doors opened up. And so I met people in the media. I started meeting the players on the team. I eventually started getting requests from other blogs and newspapers to become now the recruiting analyst for them. So I started covering BYU in the recruiting circles. I got media passes to go to football games and be on the field with the players. And so it really grew. This last year, I hit 1 million page views on that blog. And from there, I established that I was an expert in recruiting, and this is something that just developed over time, because at the beginning it was just whatever I wanted to post, but I developed this expertise in recruiting, and then other people not going to BYU or not affiliated with BYU started reaching out to me and said, well, you're building these profiles, can you build one for me? And so I created D1 Recruiting, which was a national recruiting site for people where they could get more exposure and I could help them get college scholarships. And I had a lot of expertise with that because as a professor, I was on the scholarship committee and I knew on the academic side what it took to get scholarships. But then as a recruiting analyst, now I'm working with coaches at schools all over the country and learning what they're looking for in players. And so I really had that expertise. So I built up this website, D1 Recruiting, and it's really just all along been a passion project. It hasn't made a ton of money. It gets page views, but most of what I do on there is free because I want to help these students get college scholarships. Where I have made money is I made an ebook, and sometimes I'll put up like premium profiles where they can put up way more information and stuff and pay for that. So it's been a nice little side business. Yeah. And sometimes like this week, I just got a check in the mail from a father that didn't buy anything. He just was grateful that I have this service. And so he just sent me $100 just to say thank you. That's so yeah, that's been a really cool little side hustle. And again, I'm not spending a ton of time with it. It's not a high priority for me, but it's been a fun one. That's opened doors. It's made it funner for me to go to football games now where I know most of the players. I've interviewed them. And so that's been really fun.
That's really cool. Do you see it getting to the place where you can do that full time and it is bringing in enough revenue to support what you need?
It's a market that's wide open. So if I wanted to scale it up and hire people to, a lot of the stuff I do, I could hire out. I could have a VA do it or something,
Yeah.
or even hire college students to do it like as an internship.
Yeah.
And they'd be thrilled because they'd be doing what I was doing without putting in all the legwork to get it started. So it's certainly something that I could scale up and grow into a legit business. I'm not real interested in doing that because I have other things that I'm more passionate about. So right now, I'm just keeping it as a side hustle. But if things take off in other areas and I have more time and capital, it might be something that I scale up and just hire out and just kind of manage it. So I would be interested in doing that. It's just not in that position to do that yet.
Got it. Got it. So what are some of the things that you're more passionate about?
Well, as an educator, I'm really interested in working with teachers and helping teachers enjoy their jobs because I know what it's like to be overworked and underpaid. And so I do a lot of, not as much speaking as I want to do right now, but I've started doing professional development and speaking to teachers. So I go to a lot of conferences and teach teachers about how to have more success in the classroom, especially in areas of literacy and getting kids excited to read. That's something that's where my heart is. And
That's
so I spend time, I build up educational resources. I have a new website that will be launching next year called Elementary Teacher Tips. And it's just a place where teachers can go to get resources that will make their jobs easier. And that's where my real passion is. And I'm growing that up. I'm building a blog there, and I'll eventually have a podcast
nice.
just for teachers. But, I have a lot of things on the side just because of my interest. They bring me fulfillment and happiness and a little bit of money too, which makes it nice as a teacher that I'm not starving, where we have indoor
Yeah.
plumbing and all the good wonders of life. So it's a good life right now.
I love that. And so many people talk about, focus on one thing and build up this massive company and then sell it
Mm-hmm.
and cash in. But that doesn't necessarily have to be the route that you take. I think you mentioned before the show, you did a flip as well. Is that right? Or is that what you're
Yeah.
talking about with that house you lived at?
Yeah. That was the house we
Okay.
lived at.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. But I mean, to do that, you probably learned a ton, and you've probably learned a ton doing all this stuff, and that's all invaluable. And even though you haven't, I don't know if it's your desire to build up a monstrous company and sell it and cash in and kind of ride off into the sunset or anything like that, but it sounds like what you're doing is incredibly. You have a ton of passion for it, and you're just
mhm.
enjoying it, and you're loving it. So
Yeah. Well, there's give and take. With the strategy that I've taken, I get to pursue my passions now. I don't have to wait. And so I have a really fulfilling life right
yeah.
now. What I don't have is tons of money. And if I got more focused, laser focused on one of these brands and really grew it up, there's way more potential for income if I did that. And so what I'm trading off here is doing what's making me happy instead of chasing something that might not, because money doesn't really change things for people you
Not at
know
all.
so it's working well for me. Down the road, might I focus in on one of these and really grow it up? Probably. And I hope it's this education stuff that I'm doing right now, because it is something I could see doing for the rest of my life. I really love public speaking. As I've had opportunities to go out and work with teachers, I've enjoyed that. And this last year has been an interesting year for me because I lost 100 pounds, and a lot of people want to know about the health side of what's going on. And so I've done a lot of speaking in high schools and stuff like that, just talking about how to live a healthy lifestyle. And I really enjoy that. It's not the academics, it's not the business. It's a totally new thing for me because until this year I was morbidly obese. And so I've gone through the shift, but it's really fun to see, what brings that happiness and the fulfillment. And for me, speaking and writing, I just love it. It's enough that I wake up at 4 a.m. because I want to. I look forward to waking up every day and getting to work.
That is the most important thing. I mean, if you're waking up and you're not enjoying what you're doing, whether you're working a 9 to 5 that you hate, or you own a monstrous, successful company, you own it 100%, you're making tons of money. If you're waking up and you're just dreading going in that day and
Hmm.
doing what's in front of you, then you need to change it. That's just that's how I feel. And
I'm
I've
with you.
I've been in that I've been in that boat where I was in a sales role making a ton of money, and I hated it. I woke up every day. It was like,
Hmm.
how am I going to make it through the day? Because this sucks. So that's everything you just said is really, really good information. And I love that, how you wake up and you're excited to start your day and get rolling.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing with Wealth Junkies is the people that we're talking to right now are the people who are passionate. They're the people who are starting new ventures. And we live in the coolest time right now as entrepreneurs and as small business owners, because the information that are at our fingertips is limitless. If you want to learn a new
Yep.
skill, YouTube's one click away and you can learn as much. You can even take MIT classes and other Ivy League school classes for free online. You're not going to get the degree, but you're going
Sure.
to get the information so you can develop those skills to do whatever you want if you're willing
Exactly.
to put in the work.
That's exactly right. I say that all the time, that we're in the information age, and 50 years ago, people didn't have access to what's available today. I mean, you can
Hmm.
Google how to, you can literally start how to and then
Hmm.
find anything. You
Right.
know, so there's literally no excuse. You can Google
Yeah.
how to start a company, how to mine Bitcoin, how to whatever,
Right.
and you can watch a 10-minute video and usually figure out how to get started at least.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. Well, we're going to transition over into the moments of truth section here, and I'll
Okay.
just start. Who is your success role model?
Ooh, that's hard because in the business world, there's people that have a lot of success that might not have the same personal life that I want to have, or things like that. And so when it comes to role models for me, when I look at success, I kind of have to silo that off a little bit. So when I'm looking at
You can have more than one.
entrepreneurship, yeah, well, so I'm thinking with entrepreneurship, Pat Flynn and his podcast is where I got started. And I love the dude. He's doing so much with Smart Passive Income and has really built up that brand, but he's also a genuinely good guy. And so Pat Flynn has really been an inspiration to me. In life in general, I had a professor when I was at BYU. His name's Matt Richardson. And he invited me to his home one time to see how he interacted with his wife and his family. And that has been how I've kind of tried to pattern my home life. So he's really been my mentor when it comes to real success, which has nothing to do with money or business, but with relationships. And my parents have modeled that really well, but Matt Richardson really helped me to see, how a home could be. And that was really valuable. So, take your pick from those two or three people.
Yeah. So how did that professor? How did he model his home life? Give us an example.
Yeah, well, I think a big thing was they had a lot of Richardson family traditions. There were lots of weird little things that I haven't even tried to replicate them in my own life. Like they had a family constitution and all the kids signed it and it said, Richardsons are known for being, and they would do these different things. And like the kids had to go when
That's
they
cool.
were like pre-teens, they had to do like etiquette school with their mom and dad, and to graduate from etiquette school, they took mom on a date and had to do all the fancy like silverware in the right way and get their mom's seat and open her door and stuff. And it was just those little things that they did as a family that really helped them grow together, where they were interested in one another and their different hobbies and things like that. They supported each other. And I've really tried hard to do that in my own home. And that's where I find the most happiness, honestly. Seeing how my 14-year-old son treats his 12-year-old sister, it that's worth more than any business I could ever start. And so, but a lot of that goes back to watching the Richardsons, seeing how they prayed together as a family, and just those little things that showed that they loved each other. It was really cool to kind of see that.
That is cool. I love that. That's great. What's your biggest success?
Uh, that's another tricky one because I'm already talking about my family. So I'd probably say
It
marrying my
doesn't have to be
wife.
business.
Yeah, and that has to be my success, is how my kids treat each other and treat other people. That's where I think is my biggest success. Yesterday in the grocery store, or 2 days ago in the grocery store, there was a gentleman in front of me who he had a bag of flour and it started leaking flour, and my son ran up after him and, excuse me, sir, you're dripping this flour. And it was something that 99 people out of 100 just would have let it go. But my
Right.
14-year-old son, not only did he get his attention, but he called him sir, which made me proud as a father, and tried to help him clean it up a little bit and stuff. That's where I'm the most proud of what's happened in my life and where I feel I've had the greatest success.
Yeah, that's great. That had to bring a tear to your eye.
Well, it would have, but stuff like that happens all the time. I have amazing kids.
Wow, that's great then. You're a
Yeah.
good parent, it sounds like.
Well,
Uh,
I married one, so
yeah, there you go. You got to
yep,
marry up.
yep.
What's a typical day for you look like?
Oh, that's great because I have a lot of things that I cram into my day.
Let's
So
hear
I
it.
wake up. I wake up between 4 and 4:30. I'll typically check email and do social media right now. If it's the summertime, that's when I go running. But right now, where it's dark and cold, we have ice right now. I just wake up, take care of a few things, and then I head off to work at 5. I have an hour commute, so I'll listen to podcasts and books while I commute, and then I get into work at 6, but from 6 to 7:30, that's when I work on my businesses. So I work on writing a book, or I work on social media, or just whatever I'm working on my businesses. Then from 7:30 to 3:30, that's my day job as a school teacher, and I put my whole heart into that. So that's what I'm doing. I don't take a lunch break. I work at my desk, or I go to recess with my students. So, and actually, I go to most of their specials. I go into PE with them. I go to music with them because they love having me there, and I love being with them. So I'm dead at 3:30.
Oh,
But
bet.
3:30 to 5 is when I finish lesson planning for the next day. If I have stuff for business that I need to take care of, I often will do like interviews, podcast interviews and stuff right after the school day. So I'll do stuff like that. Then I commute home. And then in the evenings, if they're still light, I go running right when I get home. So I'll run for a half hour to an hour. Then we'll have dinner. After dinner, I play with the kids till I put them to bed. We still read bedtime stories to all 4 of our kids. So even my 14-year-old, I'm reading with him before he goes to bed and talking to him. They're in bed by 9:30, and then I get an hour with my wife. And sometimes that's business does bleed in sometime to that time. So if we're both in bed, binging on Netflix or something, I might be working on a project too on the side. And then I'm early to bed, so I'm usually in bed by 10:30ish. That's
Nice.
my day. So it's a pretty good life. I have a lot crammed in there.
Yeah, it sounds like you stay busy, and that's important. It keeps you out of trouble.
Yep, it does.
Yep. What's your favorite quote?
There's a quote. It's usually attributed to Aristotle, but it's been attributed to a few other people. It's the one that goes, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit." And I love
Mm.
that because I've seen that firsthand, that if you really want to accomplish great things, you just have to work on it a little every day.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I was watching this Warren Buffett documentary about his life, and he just talked
Hmm.
about there was no day that he took his business to the next level and took it to the 10 to the sixth power or anything like that. It was just over time, slowly but surely, he just was very, very persistent and consistent in everything that he did, and that's what allowed him to kind of look back and be like, wow, I've this is crazy what I've built. So
Yeah. I
yeah.
have a Warren Buffett story. You want to hear it?
Yeah, please.
So
I love
I
studying
love
him.
Warren Buffett. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I've studied him. I've read a bunch of the biographies on him and really admire the guy. And when we lived in the Midwest, we'd go through Nebraska when we came out to visit family. So one time we wanted to stop in Omaha because we'd heard that you can drive through his neighborhood. He lives in a normal house.
Yeah.
And so we decided to just drive by his house. And my wife was all excited too because she admires him. And so we thought it was really cool. We drive with our kids. We're in our minivan and stop in front of her house. And sure enough, it's a normal house. It's gated, but it's a normal size house. And so we stop in front and pull out our phone to take a picture. And then something rolled out of our van and under the van. And so my wife went down to retrieve it, and then we hear the intercom system, and Warren Buffett's wife starts yelling at us. She's like, "Get off our property," because we're like parked right in front of her driveway, and
No
now
kidding.
under the car. She doesn't know what's going on. She's watching from the window or whatever, so she buzzes us off. And then the funniest part of this is the next morning I wake up and my wife's like, "I had the craziest dream." She's like, "I got up to heaven and I met Warren Buffett, like Warren Buffett was there, and I went to like introduce myself and say hi, and he wouldn't even acknowledge me. He's like, he totally ignored me and walked away because his wife had just yelled at me."
Wow.
So, but it was pretty funny just to go and see his house. What a cool guy,
That
you
is
know?
hilarious. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
lived in the same house for like 50 or 60 years. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And now his principles and everything he does is just incredible.
Yeah.
How he
Agreed.
built Berkshire. So, what are your hobbies outside of business?
That's hard because most of my business are my hobbies. It's the fun
I
stuff I
I
do.
hear you. That's such a tough question.
So, but I do run. I think I alluded to this a little earlier. Last year, when I lost all the weight, I got back into running in a big way. A couple months ago, I ran a double marathon. So I did a 52.4 mile run.
Yeesh.
And I love being out on the trail. We live out in the country, so I'm out on dirt roads most of the time. And it's just where I think, it's where I listen to podcasts and books. It's often, I actually have my own fitness podcast after the run. And when I go running, I'll think about stuff. And then when I get done, when I'm huffing and puffing, that's when I record. So it's like the worst podcast ever. Horrible audio quality, but I love doing it because it's a chance for me to process what I'm thinking about. And I just love being out on the trail. So running is
That's
really a
cool.
passion of mine.
Yeah, it's kind of a meditation of sorts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. What is the best business book that you've read?
Ooh, you know, there's two, and I love them both, and I hate them both. I love them because they're mindset books that help you dig in, and they're the classics. So, Rich Dad Poor Dad, one
Yep.
of the first ones I read. I love it because of the whole mindset and thinking as an entrepreneur and small business owner. Hate it because it doesn't have any actual strategy. It's all about mindset. It doesn't tell you how to actually make money. And so it was a really frustrating book for me to read right away because it just got me excited to read all his other books, which are all essentially the same thing. It's just Rich Dad Poor Dad version 2, 3, whatever. So that was frustrating. But I had the same experience with the 4 Hour Work Week with Tim Ferriss. Now that one has tons of strategy,
It
but it's all
does.
over the place.
Exactly.
And so that
It's
was hard
all
to
over.
action to put into action just because it was so much. But I reread both of those books almost every year because there's so much good stuff in them.
There really are. They're great books. I love
And
both of those.
actually, I'm reading Rich Dad Poor Dad right now with my 5th grade class. And so we'll read a
Nice.
couple pages and talk about it. It's been really fun to do
I
that with my
love that. That's
students.
so good that you're teaching them that, because I always talk about how they should teach more financial literacy in school. So that's
Yeah.
really cool that you're going through that with them.
Yeah.
Have you read his newest book called Fake?
No, I haven't.
It's pretty wild. You should check it out.
Yeah,
It's
I will. I'm always looking for a new
Yeah,
book.
it's pretty crazy. It's about how the dollar got taken off the gold standard back in the 70s,
Hmm.
and that is kind of one of the bigger themes in it. But there's all kinds of stuff. It's pretty interesting. He's a
Cool.
very interesting guy. So
Yeah.
okay, last question here. If there is one key piece of advice you could leave our listeners with about achieving success, what would it be?
Start now. It doesn't take a lot to have success. It takes consistency, and you have to take action. So quit learning about things. You've got the analysis paralysis or whatever that is.
Yep.
Stop just thinking about it. Stop just consuming. When you're done listening to a podcast, take action. Do what they tell you to do.
That's so great. I love that. That's such a recurring theme on here too, that so many people sit around and they think, oh, if I just read this one more book, this one more podcast,
Right.
this one more seminar, I'll be ready to go. And
Mm-hmm.
truth is, you'll never be ready to go. You're always going to be failing and improving and learning and all that. So, I mean, yeah, that's great. Start now. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Well, Tyler, how can our listeners get in contact with you? Anything you're promoting? How can they find your books and all
Yeah.
that?
So I do have a website, tylerchristensen.com. Christensen's ENSEN at the end. And so that's kind of my hub for all the different things I'm doing. If you want to reach out to me, you can go through the contact form there. I respond to all the emails. So pretty easy to get a hold of. Not so much on social media. I just go through my website's the easiest way. But then I wrote a book on transformation. So with this last weight loss thing, my newest book, it's actually coming out this next week. And so if you want to link to that, it's called Unlock the Power of Transformation. And it's been just a joy to write that. It's another one of those books where people kept asking me, how did you do it? How did you do it? And so I wrote down how I did it. And it's been really fun to put that together, to pull out the pieces and identify how I was able to lose weight, but also connect that to business and how I've been able to start other ventures and have success in transforming my life in other areas. So love writing the book, and now I'm excited to start sharing it with others.
Love it. I love it. So people can find that on Amazon?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Well, Tyler, we really appreciate you coming on the show.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it was a fun interview. So guys, don't forget to go to facebook.com/group/wealth junkies and join our group, and then follow us everywhere and subscribe to our show wherever you're listening, iTunes, Stitcher, whatever it may be. And we'll see you again tomorrow. Again, Tyler, thanks so much.
Thank you, Will.